And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, you cannot make this stuff up. The city of Los Angeles is facing a $1 billion budget shortfall, and Ulysses Hernandez just asked to request for $1 million to continue passing out meth pipes at MacArthur Park.
And it's not even Halloween.
Yes!
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Well, we found out earlier this week that you should be able to use the high-speed rail from, what was it, Gilroy to Palmdale in 2045?
20 years from now, maybe, because none of this stuff happens on time. Remember, they originally said San Francisco to L.A. would be done by 2020, 5 years ago.
And there's no rail aid in L.A. or San Francisco.
Despite all that, this new CEO of the California High-Speed Rail Authority is very optimistic about the project. For more, here is ABC 7 in the Bay Area.
The head of California's high-speed rail project, Ian Chowdhury's funding plan would commit the state to paying back private investors, possibly with interest, to give the state more time to cover the cost.
So we're going to borrow a whole bunch of more money.
That sounds like a prudent idea.
We're going to get investors to invest, and we're going to guarantee their return with the state's coffers 20 years from now.
Chowdhury worked on high-speed rail projects in Europe and believes connecting San Francisco to Los Angeles via the Central Valley is well worth it.
Yeah, but we're not doing that.
No, that's all in your head, Chowdhury.
By the time this thing gets completed, the Star Trek teleporters will be here.
Do you realize, by the way, when did we vote on high-speed rail?
2008.
Okay. That was when we figured out what we were going to do. So the technology that we will be using, if and when this actually ever happens, will be 2008 technology.
Oh, it goes back even further than that. We voted on it in 2008. The High-Speed Rail Authority was established in like 1995.
Can you imagine if you bought a car that hasn't been driven before, but the technology that's being used in the car is 15 years old or older? Who would do that?
That's what we're doing. You got to remember, high-speed rail, in 2008, high-speed rail sounded like new technology. Japan built their first high-speed rail in 1965, 60 years ago.
I love the fact that when you bring that up to the people who are responsible for high-speed rail here in California, they go, yeah, well, Japan had an advantage. They just got bombed.
Well, and you remember, originally, the high-speed rail brought the Japanese to consult, and they said, it's so insane here, we're going to go to Africa, and we're going to build a high-speed rail in Morocco, which they did.
I'll tell you, one time I was doing an ocean swim over in Huntington Beach around the pier, and I got beat by this guy who had no legs. And I made the argument that that actually was an advantage for him because he didn't have the legs weighing him down. And I did it with as much of a straight face as I could. No one really believed me, but that was my story, and I was sticking to it. So I guess if I could make the argument that having no legs is an advantage, then the High-Speed Rail Authority could make the argument that Japan had an advantage over us because they had just gotten bombed by a nuclear weapon.
California High-Speed Rail Project is really not about just moving people from point A to B.
Oh, this is the new guy that's in charge.
Oh, yes.
And what's the first thing he says? Oh, it's not really about a train.
Oh, no, it's a jobs program.
California High-Speed Rail Project is really not about just moving people from point A to B.
Which is the point of a rail.
If the point is not to move people from point A to point B, what's the point of a train?
It's not about having a bunch of business people from San Francisco trying to get to LA for their business meetings.
Wasn't that how this was sold to everybody, that you would take so many people off of those Southwest flights?
Oh, don't tell me that this is for the homeless, too.
It is connecting communities all the way, and especially Central Valley, which has been ignored from the main arterial highway system for a very long time.
Oh, this guy really is drinking the Kool-Aid.
This is about, of course, connecting Fresno to the rest of the state, which is already done through highways.
And air travel. They have airplanes in Fresno.
They just redid their airport. It's supposed to be beautiful there.
You know what the airport code is there?
What's that?
Fat.
But, of course, this isn't about connecting the Central Valley to the Bay Area or the Central Valley to Southern California, because the leg of the train that they started to build, and the only one they might have finished by 2033, is connecting one part of the Central Valley north of Bakersfield to another part of the Central Valley, Merced.
The only thing that could be used for, going from Kern County to Merced, is prison transfers.
But California's high-speed rail still faces strong opposition. The Trump administration threatened to pull $4 billion in federal funding earlier this year.
By the way, isn't it a little insulting if you wonder how high-speed rail has been funded over the years? Part of the money was that bond that we voted on. But since then, we've been spending all of the cap and trade money. A quarter of all cap and trade money goes to high-speed rail. So every time you fill up your car at the gas station, you're funding high-speed rail.
Cap and trade was such a scam, and every day we learn more about what kind of screwed up deal that was.
It's a total grift. The fact that the California Air Resources Board voted to raise cap and trade fees, which was going to raise the cost of gasoline, and then the next day said, we're going to use cap and trade fees as a voucher program to give people discounts on e-bikes, you knew this whole thing was a scam.
100%.
Republican state lawmakers have opposed the project since its inception and say it is time to stop.
So this project is more expensive than the whole enchilada of our whole state budget. When I say that, it means K through 12, the transportation system, CSU, UC, healthcare, everything we spend in the state is less expensive than this one project. And this has been so mismanaged. My dad always taught me, if you dig a hole for yourself, the best way to get out of that hole is to stop digging.
You have
Never heard that one before.
Yeah. Well, just think about the logic of Sacramento. We have no train, but we've got a million hobos.
You have opponents of big programs in other countries while you're trying to build it. But once it's built and done, those people who were critiques are the biggest beneficiaries of when the system is in place.
No, we'll all be dead. Everyone paying for this train will be dead by the time it finally gets finished. And with your cost overruns, people who aren't even born yet are going to be paying for it too. And I don't even know what number they're using now as to what the cost will be, but they better figure that out in bananas, because apes will be controlling the world by the time they finish.
The project's price tag now exceeds $100 billion, more than triple the initial estimate. It has mostly been funded by the state through the voter-approved bond and money from the state's cap and trade program. A little less than a quarter of the money has come from the federal government.
Yeah, that money's going away.
Oh, yeah. We're taxing people in Nevada to pay for this nonsense.
If the project does become fully funded and continues to move forward, the first phase is not expected to be complete until at least 2033.
Okay, that's if they finish on time, which they never do.
And, of course, the only way to get this thing going is because they need another $7 billion by next year, which the CEO thinks he's going to get from private investment.
Oh, good luck with that.
Meanwhile, the other high-speed rail line that we're looking at is the one that goes from Victorville to Vegas. And that one is also suffering from a lack of private investment. And that's a private rail line.
You know what I think happened there? And you see this happening all over the state. And you see this really impacting Nevada. In Nevada, there used to be a lot of action going on in places like Reno and in Laughlin and State Line, Nevada. But the moment those Indian casinos started going up, people stopped driving to all of those destinations. So State Line, Nevada looks like a ghost town. Laughlin looks like a ghost town. And Reno is a shell of itself. I would imagine that if Nevada was the only game in town and people didn't have the option of playing at the Indian casinos, they would have figured out a way to get this train done on time because it would have cost them so much money to be late.
Let's check in with Fox 5 in Las Vegas to find an update on that high-speed rail.
It will be the fastest train in the U.S., connecting Southern California to Southern Nevada at speeds topping 200 miles per hour. Brightline West will be America's first true high-speed passenger rail system, getting people from Las Vegas to Rancho Cucamonga twice as fast as driving.
It is so funny that we're celebrating something that hasn't been built yet in this country that other countries built 60 years ago.
Yeah, and what's funny is we were ahead of all of these countries for a very long time, and now we can't build anything.
A correspondent for Trains Magazine and Trains.com who had rode the trains recently traveled this route, and our Kim Passoff joins us live with what he found out. Kim.
You know, I guess print isn't dead if Trains Magazine can exist.
Yeah, so where I am...
Do you think Jerry Brown subscribes?
I don't know. But if you're a subscriber to Trains Magazine, I wonder if there's a bunch of those ads for cologne and perfume in there.
Yeah, so where I am standing right now, this is the future location of the train station here in Las Vegas for Brightline West. We are just off of the I-15, a little bit north of Blue Diamond. We're actually really close to Harry Reid Airport. We are closer to the rental car.
So it doesn't take you right to the Strip.
It takes you to the airport?
Takes you to the rental car lot.
Why would you want to do that?
I don't know. Well, they can't cut the cabbies completely out of this.
We are closer to...
You would figure that if you're going to build a high-speed rail bullet train to Vegas, it would take you right into the Mandalay Bay.
Oh, after a couple of hours sitting on the train, chronic gamblers have the shakes. They need to get right to that video poker machine.
I hope they have little machines inside the train car that turn on as soon as you hit Prim.
We are closer to the rental car area of the airport than the airport is itself, but clearly there is...
Takes you from Victorville to Avis.
Well, if it took you to Hertz, maybe if he was still alive, O.J. Simpson would take it.
But clearly there is a lot of work left to be done here. Bond documents state that the train will likely not be ready for the 2028 Olympics as previously planned.
Wait, that's what they said. They said it's going to be so exciting because all the international people can come to L.A. and then immediately leave L.A. to go gamble in Vegas.
Well, they're going to be taking Southwest.
So where does the entire project stand now, and what challenges lie ahead? It is a journey with twists and turns.
It's Vegas.
You know what's funny? And this is an important point that sometimes gets lost. You know why Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley?
Why is that?
Because of the Transcontinental Railroad. At that time, the railroad was the most up-to-date technology that this country had. Leland Stanford was the guy that brought Southern Pacific to the state of California and connected the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. That's why Stanford University is there. He wanted it to be the epicenter of new technology for the globe. It is literally California ingenuity of the Transcontinental Railroad and Leland Stanford and rail travel that connected the United States together. Without us, there would have been no Southern Pacific. And now we can't even build rail that takes you from one part of the state to the next, or from our state to the neighboring state.
It is a journey with twists and turns and a lot of steep climbs.
This project is really pushing the envelope for high-speed rail all over the world. And the main reason is because the highway has some very steep grade, some curves that, while they're not really sharp by highway standards, they are by railroad standards.
Will the train stop in Baker so you can get some of that jerky?
Well, you know why people stop in Baker.
Why is that?
Because in Baker, besides the beef jerky that they have, I think they have a Greek restaurant. They have the world's largest rectal thermometer.
Bob Johnston has traveled the world writing for Trains Magazine and Trains.com since 1991.
I'm being completely honest. kind of jealous of that guy's life. That sounds fun.
And spent a day documenting the future route. From a bridge in Barstow to a geothermal boring site near Sloan.
If this train is going to go up to 220 miles an hour, it needs right-of-way that does not have any highway crossings.
So they're going to put this thing right down the middle of the 15.
They have solved that problem.
The 208.
What happens when a big rig jackknifes on the 15 and then goes to where the rail is?
Yeah. Then you're going to have two SIG alerts, one on the road and one on the rail.
15-mile line will mostly run in the median of the I-15, which Johnston says is a game changer. He also noticed on his drive long stretches of flat straightaways where the train can gain speed.
You mean where there's nothing?
Well, there's really nothing between Victorville and Las Vegas anyway.
They can amass quite a bit of power to go very fast up a hill.
While he documented some of the work being done now, the vast majority has really yet to begin.
First of all, they have to adjust the roadway before they can even lay tracks.
Okay, so there's going to be a ridiculous amount of construction on the 15 for the next 3 years.
As if they need more traffic and more slowdowns on that freeway anyway.
And the plan is, and it still is, to start that in several different locations along the route. They have not been able to actually nail down all of the funding yet. That's one of the reasons why this has been delayed.
One of the reasons.
Even private capital projects crack me up because they don't actually have all the money to do this. But if you start the project, maybe everyone will invest.
That's quite a strategy.
It doesn't matter if it's public or private. We have no business building trains in 2025.
No, we don't. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, with the weekend quickly approaching, if you want to continue listening to us all weekend long, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's the Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You could download all the episodes. You could do what Mr. George Gascon likes to do to himself in the middle of the night.
Do a Google on YouTube.
Isn't it nice that we haven't heard from him in a while? And make sure you load up that phone with as many podcast episodes of this show as you can, because you don't want to be caught having to listen to just Pammy Price or worse, Gavin Newsom's podcast.
And that's a up system.
It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a former member of the LA City Council and LAPD Sergeant, Councilman Dennis Zine. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Okay, Councilman, I think that at least for the first, well, actually for all three of these, you could assume that these stories are coming from The Onion, but they're not. They actually happened here in the state of California, and I want to pick your brain as to just exactly what's going on. Let's start out with the California legislature that refused to make buying and selling 16 and 17-year-olds for the purposes of sex a felony. They said if they were to do that, it would negatively impact ethnic minorities and the LGBTQ community, and they don't want to put any more people in protected classes in prison, so they want the buying and selling of 16 and 17-year-olds for the purposes of sex to remain a misdemeanor. Your thoughts?
Well, it just falls in line with the illogical approach of Sacramento legislation, where they wanted to pass a law that says you can't defend yourself if someone breaks in your house. You got to run away. So they are so distorted in their views and the legislation. But this is just another example of a long list of examples where our state legislature doesn't care about victims, doesn't care about law enforcement, doesn't care about protecting people of California. They care about coming up with obscene and ridiculous bills and proposals. But the thing that they like to do is tax spend, and come up with illogical approaches to make California a beautiful, safe state. So just one more example of how out of touch the Sacramento legislative body is when it comes to legislation that's there to protect the people of California and give law enforcement and the courts the tools to enhance that protection. So just another bizarre, absurd rule establishment by the established legislature of the state of California. Sometimes we refer to them as crazy people or wackos, but this is just another in a long list. This is not the first time they've done this, long list of these types of legislative ideas.
This is one of these things where I guess in the dead of night behind closed doors in Sacramento, you can get away with it in an era of groupthink. But just imagine if the person who did this, who's the chairman of that committee, were to be sitting down having dinner with you and a couple of your buddies, and you're having a couple of drinks, and the guy goes, you know what I think? I think buying and selling 16 and 17-year-olds for the purposes of sex should be a misdemeanor. There's no way in a setting like that you could defend that position. No way.
No. But Sacramento believes that the crazy attitudes is what keeps them in office. And hopefully California voters will come to the realization that this is not the way we want California to be, to lead, and to establish itself. The only thing that I can honestly say we have good in California is the weather. Other than that, everything, the taxes, the environment, the lack of law enforcement, the courts, everything, it's crumbling. And I was born and raised here, and I know how it used to be, and it's far cry from what I would think people would want to raise a family. You can't even afford a house or an apartment. It's just, you can't park your car on the street because there's no place to park. And if you do park, they'll get broken into. It's gone into a chaotic situation.
And I would imagine, too, as someone who was a beat cop for a while and worked in various layers of the LAPD, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you're talking about children who are bought and sold for the purposes of sex, there are perverts who are out there. There are pedophiles who are attracted to prepubescent children. But I would imagine the majority of them are 16 and 17-year-olds. Biologically, they're adults. They're very, very, very young. They're not of legal age. They're under the age of 18. But I would imagine if you were to talk about just the volume of sex between people trying to buy and sell children for those purposes, 16 and 17-year-olds are probably the majority of them.
I would say so. I think when I worked Hollywood Division many years ago, the Greyhound bus depot right near the police station, which was on Wilcox, that was a favorite place for those young teenagers coming to Hollywood to be drawn as stars. Those dreams vanished real quick, and they got taken into that nasty environment. And some of them never escaped. But that's all part of that culture. And we do have different cultures, different reasonable, unreasonable situations here in the City of the Angels. And I think, honestly, the Angels have fled Los Angeles a long, long time ago.
We're speaking with former Los Angeles City Councilman Dennis Zine. Councilman, the California legislature is now also considering legislation that would decriminalize welfare fraud of any amount under $25,000. What do you make of that one?
Oh, it's just another laughable situation. It piles up. The Sacramento legislators and the staff, and I've been to the Capitol a number of times, and it's a lovely environment, except I don't know where they get the ideas that come up with these. They get elected by a population in the state of California, and then somehow they go down the wrong track. But this is just another absurd example. It's like the law is there, reasonableness is important, and don't rip off the system. And if you would enforce the law and you had the resource to do that, people would probably comply and we have fewer problems. But this is just another crazy idea. You think that our legislators, the legislative sessions that they have, they come up with reasonable ideas and solutions to help solve some of the magnificent problems. The magnitude is incredible. Come up with some ideas to do something to address instead of coming up with these absurd ideas. And let's not criminalize, let's decriminalize. Let's decriminalize everything and just have a chaotic situation in California. This falls in line with the chaos that the leaders sometimes bring. I don't know how they get elected. Honestly, I don't know how they get elected. people need to understand. People you put in the political office are going to set the lifestyle that you're going to lead, either happy or sad. Criminals are going to run free, like when Gascon was the DA of Los Angeles County, criminals ran free. Well, now we have a DA that thinks differently. We need to put people in office in Sacramento, in our local offices, in the council, the board of supervisors, who have logic and reasonable sense to protect us and our families. It seems to be a simple task, but they can't grasp that for some reason, and they come up with these absurd ideas. And so if you're cheating the system up to $25,000, well, let's just make it $100,000, whatever. It's taxpayers' money. Well, the taxpayers suffer the consequences. We all suffer the consequences. Just another crazy idea out of Sacramento.
So I think there's actually a connection between this one and the last one that we talked about, because in Sacramento, they see everything through the lens of race. And they did not want to make buying and selling 16 and 17-year-olds a felony for the purposes of sex, because they thought that it would lead to over-incarceration, filling up the prisons with minorities, those sorts of things. And I think that with the welfare fraud, in their mind, it's black people and it's immigrants and it's, I guess, LGBTQ who are doing it, and they don't want to come down hard on them, so they don't want to go after them aggressively. But I think that's a very negative view to have towards those groups. And I bet you anything, it's a whole lot like EDD fraud, where those are the people who are probably working two jobs to pay for all of this theft and graft. And it's organized crime who's stealing from the system. That's what happened with EDD to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. They weren't even in state. They were out-of-state crooks who were stealing from the state of California because we're dumb enough to give them the money. I bet you it's organized crime that's running the prostitution, and I bet you it's organized crime that's stealing from the welfare system, too.
I wouldn't doubt it, because organized crime is rampant, as we know. And we have a lot of investigations to take place, and it takes a long, long time to bring them to justice. But these ideas, I don't know how the people get elected to office to come up with these ideas in the first place, because you go through a screening process before you're elected to any kind of office, whether it be a council office, supervisors, assembly, senate, etc. You go through a screening process. There's competitors in that, people who want that position. And how these people get elected and come up with these wacko ideas, it's beyond my imagination how they can come up with these ideas. Because when you're elected, you're supposed to represent the people, all the people. And it's not a matter of race or religion. It's a matter of what is good for the people, period. It doesn't matter about anything else. So when these ideas come forward, it's like, where do they come up with this? And if the voters say, stop it, the only way to stop it, get rid of these people in the state legislature, and the millions and millions of dollars they spend doing these legislative ideas and the proposals and the time it takes and the process, it just, it's a lot of wasted money, taxpayers' money.
LA Mayor Karen Bass is facing a $1 billion budget shortfall in the city of Los Angeles. She also says that she is not an advocate for defunding the police, and she cut a deal with the LAPPL where no sworn officers would be laid off in the upcoming budget. However, she did cut the civilian employees who work for the LAPD, the people who do a lot of the heavy lifting that allows the officers to go out and patrol the streets and do all of the things that we see LAPD doing on a daily basis. You eliminate the support staff for that department, and sworn officers are going to end up doing administrative tasks that are probably not something that they should be doing. She says that she's supporting public safety with this budget, and this is proof of her commitment to public safety. She's also not cutting the budgets of all the worthless social programs that we know are not producing results, like the ambassadors and all the money she's spending on the homeless, and for the program that she was showering money on that ended up spending money on gang activity, those sorts of things. What do you make of her argument that she's not actually defunding the police because sworn officers didn't take a hit?
Well, let me give you a little history. I joined the LAPD in 1968. In 1968, officers, LAPD, would do intersection control. They would write parking tickets. We had DOT come into play. DOT came around. They took over all those responsibilities, directing traffic, writing parking tickets, etc. That became an entity of itself, so the police officers could do police work. Well, as we civilianize, a lot of these operations, we used to have police officers in communications division, along with civilians. Well, they decided let's have it all civilian, which is wonderful, to dispatch units to take those calls of service, 911 calls, etc. So if you start taking those positions away, and those positions need to be filled, you're going to be taking police officers out of the field. These officers are then going to assume those positions. So we civilianized a lot of responsibilities within the LAPD and gave it civilian, the dispatchers, the 911 operators, etc. We made those civilian positions so we would be able to have officers on the street. And what the mayor wants to do is have the goal set at 8,733, 8,733 officers. That's what she wants LAPD, from the chief down to the uniformed officer who's the probationary officer. Currently we have 8,738. We have 8,738 LAPD as of the 26th of this month. She wants to drop that to 8,733. She wants fewer officers than we have now, and at the same time, the officers that we have are going to have in the future are going to be diverted to these other responsibilities. You have a homicide. You need to have your detectives. You need to have the support personnel. You need to photograph the scene. You have collisions, traffic collisions where people get killed. You have to have that evidence maintained. So you're going to strip those civilian positions. They're going to be backfilled by police officers, which means you're going to have fewer officers on the street to do police work, fewer detectives to follow up. This is an absurd idea. I respect the mayor and her wisdom and her wishes to be the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, but when you want to start cutting, we're not going to cut police officers, but we're going to cut the civilians. Let's cut the mechanics, so we'll be like the fire department where they don't fix the fire trucks, we won't have the police cars. And if you look at the fleet of vehicles currently within the LAPD, the black and whites, they need to be replaced like a few years ago, but they're salvaging them as long as they can because the budget. So what we're going to have is fewer officers in the field, fewer officers handling the 911 calls, and many times, and these officers work in patrol are working 12-hour shifts 3 days a week. They work 12-hour shifts. Many times those officers are held over because there's a backlog of so many radio calls that the oncoming watch has not enough of them to fill the void to handle all those calls. So we're either going to have a police department that can do the job of protecting and serving, but if you're going to have, we had that goal of 10,000, and back in 1979, we had 10,072. We're down to 8,738. 8,738 for the city of Los Angeles? I mean, it's absurd. So we're not going to cut police, we're going to cut civilians. So then who's going to do the job that the police are doing? Who's going to do the civilian job? The police are going to do the civilian job in addition to their job, so there'll be fewer officers serving the public, more opportunity for criminal activity in the City of the Angels that has a serious problem. But let's talk about the billions and billions of billions they spent on homeless and go anywhere in the city. The homeless are not going away. I don't care if it's 1% or 2% or 5% reduction. We're spending billions. Let's put some of that into doing other city services instead of this goal. They're never going to solve that problem of homeless, and all they're doing is throwing money away, and not millions, but billions of dollars. That's the bottom line. Let's do what the priority is. Let's serve the public and keep them safe. And as far as the homeless, there's other alternatives we can do with that are legal and justified, but we're spinning our wheels trying to take care of them as we're doing now. It's not working.
Former Los Angeles City Councilman Dennis Zine. Councilman Zine, thanks so much for stopping by. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you, John.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. Coming up next hour, we're going to be joined by ABC News legal analyst Royal Oakes and Mrs. Las Vegas herself, Heidi Harris. She's going to stop by as well. Don't you go anywhere. We have one more hour to come right here on The John Phillips Show.